Brian, we're now a full week into preseason camp. 6 practices have been conducted. They had a day off on Wednesday, back at it today. It sounded like Carl Jarrell was generally pretty pleased, but the execution lacking a little bit as they are kind of throwing a lot at these guys early on.
Yeah, it's always interesting to listen to, what coaches are going to give you as far as how the team actually looks. Last year I remember, with Mel Tucker, it was like, man, everything is just kind of rosy, except for there was like 1 or 2 practices where he came out and just kind of lit into him. And with Darrell, every day he's come out and said, hey, they look good. But, when you really listen to him, there's some honesty in there too to say, hey, I'm pleased with, in general, with how they're doing, but the execution hasn't been great. We need to clean that up. And so, it sounds like things are, from his standpoint, the message he's giving us sounds like things are going kind of the way he projected it would be. That, like, he didn't expect there to be excellent execution at this point, but he's liking the way they're picking things up and kind of and he really mentioned, Adam, how today was a test for them to see how they responded from a day off, and they did a pretty good job responding to that.
Obviously, Mel Tucker and Carl Jarrell have very different demeanors, personalities, and Carl Jarrell was asked about his demeanor today, and he mentioned that it comes from his parents. His father was a naval officer, and that makes a lot of sense. I had not heard that about Carl Jarrell before, that his father was in the Navy in a position of power. It makes a lot of sense after hearing him mention that.
Yeah, it does. And he mentioned, kind of watching his father, how he handled things when things were not going well and when things were going great, and how he kind of kept that even keel. And you look at Darrell throughout these 7 months or whatever that we've known him, and that's how he's handled things. Adam, is that you talk to him, and there's times that I've talked to him throughout this offseason where you can tell he's fatigued from the Zoom and disappointed. When I talked to him shortly after things were shut down in August, you could tell there was some disappointment there, and he kind of didn't know what to do with himself a little bit, but he still maintained that even keel, and has kind of kept that demeanor with the team. And he said he feels like it's rubbed off on the team. I don't know about you, but I've heard from parents of players and some players that really like that about him, that feel like he's handled things really well.
Well, if there's ever a year you want a head coach to have that type of demeanor, this is the year. And speaking of COVID-19, I think you asked him about the health of the team, mentioned that there's been 0 positives so far, which is obviously good. A long way to go, though, to try to get into the season opener 100% healthy.
Yeah, a long way to go. They're only a weekend, but having 0 positives is, well, a positive, I guess, at this point. And you would, I guess, expect that with them, kind of quarantining in the hotel. I did ask Carl, last week I was able to chat with him, outside of our Zoom call, and I asked him how transparency was going to be throughout this season, and he said he didn't really know. He said a lot of that's kind of above me, and this was after the first day, and he said, all I can tell you is that we had none today. But he didn't know how transparent. So I'm curious to see what happens when CU does have positives. But the fact that I don't think he would tell us there's 0 positives if there really has been some positives. So that's a good thing. I'm just curious to see how transparent they're going to be throughout this whole season. But you're right, long way to go. They still got 3 weeks before a game, and then another 7 weeks or so of games. So we got about 10 weeks of this. So first week is good.
Tight ends coach Taylor Embry and tight end Brady Russell also joined us on the Zoom today. Based on Taylor Embry's comments, it's pretty clear that behind Brady Russell, Matt Lynch, the graduate transfer from UCLA that is from Colorado here, is probably running number 2 clearly at this point, just based on how much he talked about Matt. And he did say nice things about the other players and talked about how Nick Fisher is a true Y and a guy that could help them possibly as a run blocker. But I thought it was pretty clear based on those comments that Matt Lynch is probably going to see the second most action unless something drastically changes here in the next few weeks.
Yeah, Coach Embry mentioned, Matt's going to play a lot for us, and that's a kid with experience. He's done a lot of different things, and as you know, I ran into James Stefano at a park recently, and he kicked some field goals with my son, and I was chatting with him, and he mentioned Matt Lynch. I hadn't really thought about this before, but Lynch was a holder at UCLA, and he mentioned that Lynch has been doing some holding for them. So I'm curious if he fulfills that role as well. So it could be interesting to see how much they put Lynch on the field. But I think with his experience, Brady Russell also said some nice things about Lynch. But Emery mentioned Luke Stillwell being a possible mismatch in the passing game, and who were the other guys? I mean, Jake Peters is out there. Nick Fisher being a big guy in the run game, and Russell actually mentioned C.J. Szymanski kind of stepping up as well. So I think that, Adam, to me, I don't know what you feel, but it seems like there's just a lot more depth in that tight end room than we've seen around here in a long time.
I asked Brady Russell, how is the tight end used in this offense compared to last year? He didn't get very specific, but he said they're doing different things there. What do you take that to mean?
Yeah, he kind of said different things. He said we were used a lot last year, but it was all kind of the same type of stuff. And, it was basically you're either going to block in the run game or go out for a pass pattern. And so I took it to mean that they're going to do a variety of things. I mean, they might, he mentioned maybe pulling the tight ends and on some run plays. Maybe they line up in the backfield as fullbacks and do some different things, maybe more in the slot, which we saw some last year as well. But it sounds like they might use them just kind of in a variety of ways, which I like. I think it'll be kind of fun to see what they do.
Carl Durrell was also asked about the cornerbacks. The first name he mentioned there, Mekhi Blackmon. He's a guy that's easy to forget about because he got hurt so early last year. But remember last August, Brian, he was a guy that was making plays on a very consistent basis. We only had an opportunity to see the team practice a few times as media members, but it seemed like he's kind of a ball hawk out there, very skinny. He told me before that he eats 5,000 calories a day, just can't gain any weight, which I joke with him. He's going to, hope he has that issue when he's older in his life. But, he's not going to be, a very physical guy. But again, I think he's a playmaker.
Yeah, first off, I do not have that same issue as Mekhi, but yeah, we saw him. I think it was the spring game in 2019. He had a couple of interceptions. He's shown some interceptions in the practices we saw last year. I'd like to see him be healthy because when he is healthy, he has played well, and clearly he's made an impression on Coach Durrell in the early going. I thought it was interesting that Durrell, the second guy he mentioned, was Tariq Luckett, and how much he's really improved from obviously Durrell watching just the film from last year, but he sees a much different player than he saw in film last year. KJ Trujillo is still, battling in there as well. And he started most of the season last year. So I'm curious, what that pecking order is. I don't know if it's necessarily Blackmon, Luckett, then Trujillo, but it's interesting. I thought that Blackmon and Luckett were both mentioned before Trujillo.
Yeah, when you're covering practices virtually, you maybe overanalyze things sometimes, right? Just in the order that they're mentioned, but it's kind of the situation we have to deal with at this point.
Yeah, and to be fair, these guys, Coach Durrell is just walking off the field from practice, and he doesn't know he's going to get asked about the corners, and who knows? He talks about Mekhi, and then he's probably thinking, okay, who's next? Maybe. It doesn't necessarily mean that's where they are, but it is. We analyze things and overanalyze things when you can't see anything other than what's on your computer screen.
All right. Well, the Buffs are going to practice again on Friday. They're going to be back on Saturday with their first preseason scrimmage. I think that's when we're going to do our next analysis video. It sounds like it's going to be a pretty intensive scrimmage. Carl Durrell call it the full Monty that's going to take place on. Yeah. There's not going to be any new players out there, but he said it's going to be the full gamut out there on Saturday.
Yeah, I hope it's not that, but yeah, yeah, it sounds like he likes to make those as game-like as possible, and so I wish we could see it. It'd be nice if we could see it, but obviously we won't. So we'll have to kind of go with what people tell us there, but and we won't get any stats from that as well. So it'll be kind of, for us, it'll be just kind of like today and every other day, but you'd like to see the Buffs get some good work in and have Durrell and the coaches be pleased with what they do.
All right. We'll be back with more analysis on Saturday.